Hello, how are you today?
Doing good, Michelle. How are you?
I am awesome, thank you. I'm so excited to talk with you about AI agents and yeah, because you and I always have like interesting discussions and can riff on different things. So let's hope everybody else enjoys it as well. You talk frequently about, transformational AI. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you mean by that and why it's important to businesses?
I think AI has gotten a lot of attention over the last 2, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
But both you and I know that AI has been around for a long time.
Yep.
It's interesting. The company SAS was founded in 1976, which is it's still around. It's an AI company, right?
Yep.
And the founder is still the CEO. So, and they have been helping statisticians, data scientists build models for AI for that amount of time. So it's not like AI is new. And I've worked at Google in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and we were doing a lot of artificial intelligence, data science work there, right? So it's been with us for a while. I think what brought this to the forefront and the public conscience is the generative AI trend, and especially the chat GPT when it became popular, because it made AI kind of mainstream. It made it accessible to the average person. It made it understandable, relatable, and it was no longer sort of this like domain where a few experts and specialists could dabble, right? It became mainstream. A lot of implications of what that means for business and enterprise and non-technical employees at businesses who prior could not have participated in sort of the AI revolution, right? So to me, that's like the big moment, and happy to dive into details about like what that means and why is that so different and what's transformational about it. But I think that to me, that's the crux of it, and I don't know anybody now who doesn't know or interact with AI in some way, shape, or form, right? Which is insane.
Yeah, so I think you're right, which is that generative AI, ChatGPT, ignited, right, this revolution, and in a way that was very different, right? Because now you didn't have to be a mathematician or a coder. You could interact in terms of language, right? And so that was really, to me, like the spark that kind of sort of opened this up. So do you see it similarly, or do you see something different there? Like, talk to us a little bit more about like, why do you think that was the catalyst for opening up this transformational AI?
I can talk about it from a business standpoint, right? Because there's a lot of consumer applications that may have a very different revolutionary trend, right? But from a business standpoint, the way, and it's exactly like what you mentioned, right? Like the way you engage with the AI is very conversational now. Before, you needed to know what kind of modeling techniques need to be applied, what kind of coding language you use to implement those modeling techniques, how do you prepare the data to be able to fed into models, like all these things that you had to become an expert in.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them have become relatively easier because you can just ask and you can command in natural language, right? And that makes it sort of more accessible. And this kind of then moves into this world of what today we call agents and agentic workflows and things like that, where if in order to build something, I don't need to learn a new tool, I don't need to learn a new coding language, or I need to learn techniques. If I'm just able to express my intent in a very modular way, right? Like in very simple prompts, and construct the kind of design and construct happens in the back end, right? Like, so whatever the platform I'm talking to builds what I want as I'm conversing with it, right? And at that point, you're just limited by your two things, right? Your creativity, your idea, and then secondly, your ability to, you know, formulate the prompts, right? Which is why people now say prompt engineering is the number one skill you need to know at work. It's like, yes, you have this brilliant idea and it's like probably very complex and sophisticated, but how do you break it down into bite-sized pieces in order to communicate that to the platform or AI so that it can then go and create what you want to create in the back end, right? I think that um, that just unleashes for a whole host of people who may have been excluded from participating in building AI because they didn't know how to code, or they don't know the data science techniques, or they didn't know the statistical underpinnings or mathematical details of what to do, by just conversing and sort of moving things along. That changes that.
So I want to go back to, I think, a key point that you made there, which is that in this process for businesses, you still have to have the idea people, right? So you still have to have that creativity to understand, like, what is possible, what threads do you want to pull on in terms of your business in order to get the AI then to do all the hard work, right? Like, so we can go and crunch, but it's not going to generate necessarily today an idea for you. You have to understand that and be able to then give it enough information to have it move along to do the work for you. So I think that that's really fascinating. And like you said, being able then to break it down into bite-sized chunks, right? So being able to understand from your idea, how do you then decompose it into small enough pieces that you can get the AI to do what you need it to do? It's very fascinating. So, there's so much hype right now about AI, right? And you and I have been around this block for a long time, right? And so, are you still excited about AI? And if so, like, why? What is it that makes you excited, and why are you excited about it?
Yeah, and this goes back to the transformational AI piece, right? Which is there is AI was the domain of large Fortune 500 companies that had data science and data engineering teams. The exciting part now is um, it can be more broadly applied to areas that truly can benefit from it, right? So whether you look at uh, companies in manufacturing wanting to do demand planning and sales operations and sales planning, or whether it's in infrastructure domain, you're trying to do some predictive maintenance, or whether it's in the domain of like energy, right? Like how do you improve the yield and things like hard real world problems, which a lot of businesses could not solve because they didn't have the access to the right talent. Now they can take the domain experts in those domains within those companies. They're not restricted by the technical capabilities. They can get things done that previously were science fiction. And so that just unleashes a whole lot of productivity and kind of a radical sort of business model change for these companies.
Mm.
And I think it truly helps everybody else sort of play catch up with big tech. In some sense, if they play this game smartly, things are now within arm's reach, what was prior impossible for these companies to do, right? And this is also where RapidCanvas sort of spends a lot of time with these businesses, right? Like manufacturing firms, infrastructure firms, real estate, energy, retail, right? Which is where there is a lot of data and a lot of data waiting to be mined for intelligence to run the business more efficiently, to improve the growth of the business and all of that. And that's where I think AI will make a huge difference. And that's why I'm excited about, being a part of this, I think this is like the second innings, right? We're in the early days of this trend of generative AI.
Yep.
So we have a long way ahead of us. I don't know if that all that happens in like 1 year or 10 years, but definitely uh, the pace of innovation, the step function change, or the rate at which things are improving in these models is like phenomenal. That there's a long way to go, and it's going to enable a lot of businesses and companies and enterprises that prior were excluded from this revolution.
So tell us a little bit more about maybe some of the applications, like some customers and like the applications, and maybe dig into that a little bit, and then tell us like what's working and what's not working for them. Because like you said, it's in a second inning, in a 9-inning game, you make lots of errors in the first couple of innings, right? And you have time to be able to course correct or to be able to catch up. So maybe tell us a little bit about what you see in terms of those types of trends.
Yeah, so I will maybe like take three examples because I think they're sort of broadly relatable to a lot of companies.
Mm-hmm.
First is let's say back office finance operations. Right?
Everybody's got that. Yep.
You know, I am a manufacturing company. I have like 6 regions, and I have an international division, and I have a US division, and all this information comes in about the financials of these divisions and business units. It might be different because of accounting standards, the kind of product mix that they're selling, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
All that needs to be collected. Any kind of anomalies, exceptions, trends that need to be mined from that data about how the business is going. That needs to be done, and then you need to like forecast what the next quarter looks like and the next year looks like, and then how do you break that down and send it back. Now imagine how many people are involved in this whole process, right? Like aggregating this, and it's largely like multiple databases, spreadsheets, people manually making changes, running macros, lots of mistakes happen along the way. And then the predictions are pretty much like, well, last year was X, like let's just put on 10% and predict for next year, and put some seasonality, like maybe 2% down in like Q3, and we're good, right?
We should be able to do better than that. Should
Yeah.
be able to, yeah.
Right. So this is where like the agentic workflows can make a difference. It's like, hey, when you collect all this information, how do you reconcile? How do you combine it? How do you identify the anomalies? Because the models are very good. The machine learning models are very good at pattern recognition.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you need to point them in the right directions. Like, hey, like look at this data. These are the fields. This is what is normal, and anything outside that is like an anomaly, right? Like you don't have to go into a lot of detail as long as you're able to give some basic instructions, right? And then you set this up, uh, uh, and then the insights and the predictions and all of this is handled by an agentic workflow. Doesn't take the humans out of the loop, right? You're still, instead of needing like 20 people to do this, you need 2, right? But these 2 people are surrounded by digital agents. So it's a hybrid team. It's a team of a couple of experts, human experts, and a bunch of digital agents. And these human experts are kind of like orchestra conductors, right? So they know how everything, all the notes and what's playing, and how to get the rhythm and tone right and all of that, right? And orchestra to sound fantastic. But in the back end, all these agents are working to their tune. So it's a one area where I think it's going to be massively disrupted by AI, simply because fewer mistakes are made in this automated process. What today takes weeks can be done in like hours. It is quite repeatable. So the next time, if you are doing the same exercise every quarter, as long as you've built the entire workflow correctly, you can just click a button and it's all done. You don't have to do it manually. So this is one area where I think AI agents can make a big difference.
So do you find in that situation, like where the workflow, do people use an agile approach where like the first time they may not get everything in the workflow, right? Maybe like exception, typically it's everybody thinks about the happy path, right? But they don't think about like all the exceptions, right? Because there could be many different exceptions. So do you see clients sort of evolving their workflows over time?
Yes. I
Okay.
think it's one of the things even I would recommend is don't bite off more than you can chew, right? Like start small, build your MVP setup. The first time you run this, maybe you get 70% of it automated and agentified.
Mm-hmm.
And the remaining 30% comes over the next 5 iterations. Because you're never going to catch all the corner cases. You're going to call, but completely, fully automating 70% on the first try is not a bad, like you could take it as a positive. I automated 70%, be like, oh shit, I just got to 70%, right? I would say take it as a win. Um, and over the next runs, try to see what else you can layer on and what else you can layer on.
Okay.
And because of this natural language capacity, you don't have to really think hard. Like if you understand what you're trying to do, you can just add it. Like literally, you can say, um, in this particular workflow, you're merging 2 files. Um, but what I also want you to do is merge these 2 files and then just convert this one column to um, from text to like numbers or something, right? Because you realize like in the third run that, oh, it's merging correctly, but it's thinking it's a text column versus a numbers column or something like that. And because you don't have to know you don't have to get bogged down by the implementation details of how to encode this. Even in Excel, like you have to know the formulas. Here, you don't have to know anything. You just have to say, this is what I'm trying to do. Go write the code to make this possible. And that's it.
It's
Uh,
very liberating to be able to do that and not have to think through all the details of it.
exactly.
It's a different mindset, right? Like you said earlier around that whole creativity mindset, like it allows you to be the driver, right? And know like where the vision is, where you want to be able to head, but not necessarily all the different potholes you need to avoid and all the detours you need to take in order to get gas to fill up the car to get to where the land is, promised land. So that makes a lot of sense. So I've heard you talk about AI walled gardens. Can you explain what is that? Why is that important in businesses? How does that help with people's AI journey and transformation?
Yeah, I think for the longest time, if you talk to like a 1,000 employee manufacturing company,
Mhm.
and you would have said you should be thinking about AI transformation. And some of the things you hear are like, well, we don't think we have our data quite in the format we need to have. It's all over the place. It's messy. It's not in a one database. It's not quite structured. We don't have data science teams. We have IT teams, so they are busy just uh, kind of putting together vendor systems that we use. We really don't have in-house capability to write code or build anything custom.
Hmm.
And so that meant that the only folks who were able to do anything meaningful was larger companies which had the scale of data science teams, data engineering teams, the ability to get large data warehouses, databases that then they could design everything and put it in a 3-year project. And so anybody who wasn't in that group felt that it wasn't easy to do AI transformation. And to me, that's like walled gardens, because a few will succeed. Even if the others tried, they can't succeed.
Mhm.
You can't do things at subscale that are meant for a different scale and expect to succeed. So even if the ones who tried wouldn't succeed, right? Now what has happened with generative AI is, like, that's that scale of the talent and having the data in the right place no longer matters. Because with generative AI, you can read PDFs and Excel, and even if it's formatted, unformatted, doesn't matter, right? The data intelligence, and you can instruct how to interpret the PDF, right? How to interpret the Excel. So you don't really have to worry about, oh, it has to go in these cells, in these rows, and these columns in this database. Like, no, you don't need to do any of that, right? So your first problem is gone, which is like, I need, structure and sanity around the data part. Then the next problem is like, okay, you don't really need data scientists and data engineers. You can converse with the platform, and your natural language is converted to code. And that code is placed in visual blocks. So you can see the visual representation of your entire workflow, right? The agentic workflow. So that the implementation becomes non-technical, non-coding, non-data science expertise. Now, the only places where experts matter most is like, how do you design your solution high level, not the implementation bits, right? How do you take that business problem and uh, create a technical solution for it, right? So for example, I have all this data about my sales and my um, supply chain. How do I build a demand plan? How do I know my inventory? How do I place orders for things in anticipation of um, uh, the sales of the future? You know the problem statement, but now how do you take this and say, okay, now I'm going to build an entire AI solution for this? Then there's a design aspect. Okay, like, what data is relevant? Uh, what kind of modeling techniques do you need on that data? Once you see the outcome of those models, like, how do you know that this is accurate um, and um, this is a result that you have confidence in? Those things need the expert in data science to actually help design that solution. Implementation is automated now because of generative AI, um, natural language to coding. But the design aspect is where you need, and validation that the design is working in the reality in the AI solution. That is where you need the expert. This is where, we at RapidCanvas believe that's where we partner best with our customers, right? Everything they want to do, they can do on the platform. They don't need us. But thinking through this, you need a thought partner. Like, okay, I'm trying to solve this problem. This is how I'm thinking about it. This is what I found on the internet when I researched about it. Am I on the right path? Am I thinking about this not quite the right way? Like, how would you do this, right? And then you sort of think through this, design it, and then the clients go implement it, right? But to me, this is how the walled garden is no longer a walled garden, because there are these companies who at scale had these massively expert teams. Now you don't need expert teams. You need maybe like one expert to help you with the design, but everything else can be done by the non-data science expert. The actual domain expert in the business can handle everything else.
So let me ask this question. So that expert is somebody who understands their business. So like the supply chain as an example, right? And so in that example, if I understood you correctly, RapidCanvas then is the tool, the platform that helps them with all their implementation bits. And if they know how to do the design, they can work on their own with the platform, and the platform does all the heavy lifting for them. But if they're new to doing this, which they probably are, right, then you and your team can help them with being their design partner. So that way they start to build up confidence and expertise in being able to do this new type of work, right? Because it's a new type of work compared to like
Absolutely.
what they've done in the past, right? Is that accurate?
Absolutely, right. Yeah,
And
they are experts in, like, you're an expert in supply chain. We don't need to teach you that.
right.
But you need to be paired with an expert in applying data science to supply chain, right? So those are experts we have on our staff, which is like, hey, there's an expert who, these are all PhD data scientists, but they're expert in particular domains, right? Like renewable energy, supply chain, CPG, retail. So oil and gas, right? All these different domains. So then these two experts can pair up uh, and decide how they want to design this solution. And that probably is the most time consuming part. The implementation is like really, really quick, but like designing it correctly and testing that your design works is probably the most time consuming part, and the part where we can add most value, um, beyond the product, right? From a human standpoint.
So you mentioned the testing part a couple of times, the testing and validating. Can you talk a little bit more about what's involved with that? Like when somebody actually, they're like, oh, this looks like an amazing solution, right? They're all excited because it took 5 minutes to create the solution using RapidCanvas. Now, how do they actually go about validating that it's going to work?
So this is a great question, because typically what has happened in the domain of like data science, AI, and machine learning is people measure the success based on the accuracy of the model or precision of the model, and all that is important. I'm not discounting that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you're trying to solve a business problem, right? If you had a predictive model that was like fantastically accurate, but it's already telling you things that you already knew, like, then what's the point? Right? Right. So it's like, what is the eventual impact you want to have? Right. So you have a model, let's say let's say a recommendation system.
Mm-hmm.
What products should you be recommending to your clients based on what they have bought before, right? One way to measure it is, hey, I built this model. This model has certain accuracy, and it's certain precision, so it's able to predict 90% accurately what they're going to buy. But the question where the rubber really meets the road is like, okay, how do you test that actually influences the buying behavior
Mm-hmm.
versus your model just gave you the answer that was obvious anyways? Like, if I buy
Right.
if
So I
I buy
always
a coffee,
I buy bread every time I buy milk. That's an
yeah,
obvious answer, right? But
yeah.
when do I actually go and buy, like, I don't know, a baby gift? I'm in Target, and when do I go and buy a baby gift, right?
That's where
That's
the intelligence is.
exactly. Okay, so that makes
So like,
sense.
how do you test this? How do you know that what metrics should you set for success that this model is actually adding business value?
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's a lot of things involved there, like A/B testing, having business metrics to validate the success. Like, okay, I am expecting that my recommendations will lead to like 20% increased sales. Okay, then you back from there and say, okay, which ones are the obvious sales that I have to discount from this, and which ones are the ones that I truly feel we can put something in front of a user that they wouldn't have normally thought about, and they're more likely to click. Then you need to understand the probability of like putting something in front of them that you think they will buy and actually they end up buying, and maybe 1 in 3 is great, or like 1 in 5 is great. So then you need to put 3 options in front of them, or 5 options in front of, like, all this, right? Like, eventually, what value do you add from a business standpoint, right, becomes the more important question.
Yep. Okay. That makes a lot of sense, like for the validation of it. So we've talked a little bit about these agents, and everybody thinks about like the agents being autonomous, right? And I've heard you talk about that it's autonomy, it's performance, and it's reliability, right? And so maybe talk to us a little bit more about why are those the three most important criteria? What do you mean by that when you talk about that?
Yeah. So to me, the when I talk about autonomy about the agents, it's not the agent being autonomous, but it's like somebody who doesn't want to write code or know how to write code can autonomously build these agents, right? So
Okay.
it's autonomy for the
Being
builder.
liberated, okay, to do that.
It's
Okay, got
not,
it.
yeah, it's not like the agent is going to, go off and do things. It's like somebody, they're empowered, right?
Mhm.
Who previously wasn't, to build agents very easily. That's where, to me, the autonomy is most important. Um, uh, the performance part of it is because you have simplified the development and the implementation of these agents to just be natural language, you can do it much faster, right? I mean, think about it like if you, in the 1980s, if you wanted to create a documentary film, you needed a film crew, you needed a camera, then you had like a reel, and then you need to like take it to the processing facility, then you need to have distributors, and probably years and years. Now you just pull out your phone, you start recording. You can have a documentary, created, edited with a bunch of software tools, published in YouTube, marketed in YouTube, and have viewers probably within a week. Right? So that ease of uh, uh, that's the performance part, right? Like how can you move things fast? Because the enablers are there, right? You're not cutting corners. It's just that you have a lot more enablement from automation and tools and ecosystem of tools and all of that to make that possible. So to me, the performance is like, how fast can you build a good solution, which before you need like 10 people and it's just like one person building it. One person is able to do in a week what you needed 10 people and 9 months to do. To me, that's performance, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then the last one is reliability. It goes back a little bit to our testing discussion. There's a lot of thought around hallucinations, and AI gives the wrong answer. And so reliability comes from multiple factors, right? Like, hey, are you protecting my data? How do you make sure it doesn't leave? It's protected in the environment I want it to be in, and it's not LLMs don't leak it or this, that, and everything, right? So there's a data protection element about reliability. There is a don't hallucinate element, right? Like I want answers that are um, grounded in reality and uh, relevant to my business context, right? And I'm willing to give as much context as possible, but don't give me something that's like doesn't understand my context very well. And then the third thing is like, do you have the transparency and auditability about what's going on? Because if I feed a model something, and this is where you can see now this idea of reasoning models, like when you type something in LLMs online, it's sort of, oh, I'm thinking about this, I'm trying to do this. It's like explaining things, because as humans, we care about the how as much about the what, right? Or the why and how as much about like what gets done, how it gets done, why it's doing it. So this explainability is also, and auditability and transparency is a big part of this reliability pillar, right? So we consider that like fundamental to our AI is like, can you explain in plain English what's going on? Because if you're going to use an AI solution to decide who should and should not get credit, if somebody comes and asks you, why did you deny credit to this person? You can say, oh, well, I didn't make this. Agent made the call. I don't know what it does. It has its own mind. That's not an acceptable answer. You should be like, here is the logic. Here is why it made that decision. Here is the data it made that decision based on. And all of that is easily explainable, right? So the
Yes.
explainability is important.
This goes back to SAS and other tools had auto model generation, okay?
Mhm.
But I would always talk about how, let's say I was a P&G analyst, okay? And they didn't use the automatic model generation typically. They wrote their own models, right? And you're like, why? Because that writing your own took weeks and weeks to do, right? And in the automatic one, you push a button and you get an answer relatively quickly. And so when I started encountering that, I'm like, why? Okay. And it was because they have to go and defend their model in front of their boss and up the food chain. And if they can't explain what's happened inside of what we would call a black box, right? If they couldn't explain it, then they weren't going to have a job for very long, right? And so nobody was going to risk their job, right? And that's why they might use that as a tool to inform them about what kind of model to build, right? But they wouldn't necessarily, because they were just trying to deduce what it had done, right? As opposed to really seeing the transparency and explainability like you're describing. And so that's really important for businesses in particular. So, it seems to me like the same old places have been doing what we're now calling AI for a very long time, right? And it seems like what you're describing is that there's new areas in businesses and new potentially even industries that are more open and receptive to AI now. And so in your experience, what are you seeing? What areas or industries seem to be more open and receptive to AI now than perhaps they've been in the past? And what's made the difference for them? Why are they all of a sudden more open about it?
Yeah, I think I'll answer the second question first. Why are they suddenly more open?
Mm-hmm.
BCG has a survey on digital transformation, and non-technology native companies, right? So companies that were in domains that weren't invented, internet or online. When digital transformation became a thing, the ones that adopted it, embraced it, versus the ones that didn't, had a 2x return of shareholder value, right? So once something becomes accessible to all and easy enough to implement, then if you don't do it, you're not going to be viable going forward, because the business model in the industry is going to change very radically, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to be playing catch up, right? So
Yep.
that's spurring people to say, wait, I've seen this story play out in databases, in digital transformation. And I know AI is moving much faster. So I want to be on the right side of this equation as things unfold, and not be caught flat-footed or on my back foot, right? So that's sort of motivating people. They get it. They have been through a couple of technology cycles. Most likely the
Yeah,
people who
I
came on
don't
the
know
right side.
if you saw last week, I think it was, McKinsey came out with a new study, and it showed that there's $4.4 trillion worth of value creation out of AI. That's the potential.
That's the
And I think
potential.
it was over like a 10-year horizon. I'm like, it's such a huge number, to your point, right? And it's
It's
going to be
crazy.
the haves and have-nots. Those who adopt this, right, are going to survive, and those who don't are just going to be left behind, right? Or they'll be minimized in terms of their business.
Yeah, because the number of people buying stuff is not going to change. Who
Right.
sells to them is going to change. And you better be the one who's relevant in the next 10 years in selling to them, right? So I think people get that.
Yep.
That's going to be a big trend, and they have to be on top of it. I would say industries, areas and industries that benefit a lot from this. One is, like I mentioned, the back office, financial, operational stuff.
Yep.
Second is sales and service, where you have to write nice emails, you have to respond to support tickets. I think the agents have gotten good enough that they can have as good or better kind of response or better framing of your message to the clients.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one area where you see a lot of this. Thirdly, it's like the areas of supply chain, operations and planning. Huge opportunity there. And the last one, I would say, IoT data. So whether it's like renewable energy, oil and gas, factories, getting all this data, building all these models, whether it's predictive maintenance or yield optimization or assembly line improvement. And it's not like there aren't other areas that will not benefit from this. It's like they were already on that path, and I think these are the areas which disproportionately benefit from the generative AI trend. and disproportionately empower people who have been excluded before.
Mm,
And so there's an entire green field that hasn't been tapped before.
very good. So if people want to learn more about RapidCanvas and how to get started with RapidCanvas, what would you suggest they do? How do they learn more?
They can come to our website. They can, we have a button that says talk to an expert. So they can always talk to an expert on our website. And they can get a nice enablement session from the expert on how to build things by just talking in plain English and and building AI solutions. It's as easy as that.
Excellent. Okay. So last question is, what 3 books, reports, resources would you recommend to people who want to learn more about agentic AI?
So 2-3 ways I kind of think about this, right? If you're new to this, and if you're trying to build an understanding um, of AI and agentic AI, right? One is the underlying fundamentals of data science and machine learning are a good starting point to understand it. So somebody who wants to go deep maybe has like 3 or 4 weeks of time to do an online course. I would highly recommend on Coursera, there is an introduction to machine learning by Andrew Ng. It's like literally anybody can go in. It's super simple. At least the first few chapters are very easy. It just grounds you in the concepts of, hey, like what is regression? What is classification? Like the basic fundamentals. The easiest way to learn is go there.
Okay.
Similarly, for LLMs, there are YouTube videos from this person who's worked at Tesla and OpenAI, and Andre Karpati. And he literally distills it down to like very simple concepts, like a 2-hour video, but he'll very simply explain LLMs and how they get trained and how they train the assistants and common man understanding, right? From a very technical person who was in the midst of it as these things were being built. So I would recommend that. And those two kind of give you a view of more academic view of this. If you want to get the business view, I think I've seen Deloitte, McKinsey have some good reports on agentic AI, how the surveys about how businesses are adopting it, what are the risks, what are the opportunities, how should people think about it. So I would, top tier strategy consulting firms, this is their
Bread and butter.
right? This is their
Yes.
bread and butter. So you can always see what information they have collected. They're talking to the execs. They're understanding the trends. I think those are great places. And just to understand, we hear a lot about the quick progress of AI and how this works and all of. For a very casual, kind of easygoing experience, there's a documentary called AlphaGo on YouTube. It's about this Google team, DeepMind, that build AI models to play the game of AlphaGo, beat the world champion, and their experience in building the models and how they train the models. I think it gives you 5 years ago, how this was done, and maybe in some areas that will be business areas, that kind of thinking and evolution will happen. So it's just, and it's a great document. It's like watching a easy watching, right? So that's the whole spectrum: the academic, the sort of business, and entertainment.
Woohoo! Excellent. That's great. Awesome. Thank you, Raul, for your time. This has been really a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and I love learning and learned some more along the way. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Michelle, and have a good weekend.